What's up, everyone? This is Adam from Slurve, Ship My Money on DraftKings, and I'll be breaking down today's pitching slate for you for Friday, August 5th. Today's a pretty fun slate with 15 games, a game in cores, and some pretty good pitching options going in really in all the tiers. So, starting with tournaments on DraftKings, there's a handful of pitchers that I like. They all, have varying levels of risk, but we'll start with Michael Pineda at 8,600 against the Indians. It's not an ideal matchup because the Indians, are a really good hitting team and they have a lot of, power hitting lefties. But there is upside there because his price reflects the poor matchup at only $8,600, and he has a 28% strikeout rate against left-handed batters. And the Indians strike out about 20% of the time against right-handed pitching this season. So they're, a league average team on their own. And then Pineda's got, excellent strikeout stuff. He has the fourth highest whiff per swing rate in the major leagues. It's just a matter of if he can keep pitches out of the middle of the plate and not make those mistakes that cost him. But the upside's there for sure for him to have, a really big game at 8,600. And I don't think he'll be very popular today because of all the other options and because people don't want to target pitchers against the Indians. Justin Verlander at 13,600 is really, really overpriced. But if you're not playing cores, I think that makes him a really interesting option because he's not going to be highly owned because of everyone going after the expensive bats. So it gives you a chance to get the pitcher who, in my opinion, is in the best spot tonight, and he's going to be low owned because of the price. The Mets are going to have a lot of left-handed hitters in that lineup. And this season, Verlander has a 28.9% strikeout rate against lefties with only 21% hard contact and 17% soft contact. So if you're not playing cores and you can fit Verlander, I think it's a great spot to pay up to be contrarian and lock in probably the most upside on the slate at pitcher. Um, Blake Snell at $8,700 going against the Twins, I think is a really good spot. He's at home in Tampa. And the Twins this season have struck out about 23% of the time against left-handed pitching. They do have a 105 WRC+, but most of those numbers were accumulated with Eduardo Nunez at the top of the order, and he now plays for the Giants. So they're going to be a little bit worse against left-handed pitching than they have been, and they already were striking out a lot. So I think there's definitely high upside in this matchup for Snell, who so far in pretty limited sample size, but has struck out about 22% of right-handed batters with 20% soft contact and only 26% hard contact. So this is a spot that I think Snell could do really well. Scott Kazmir at $8,000 is facing the Red Sox in LA. The Red Sox played an extra inning game last night and then had to fly from Seattle to LA. So they might not be at the top of their game today. And they're going to run out a very right-handed heavy lineup. And Kazmir strikes out about 27% of righties with 22% soft contact. He's a guy that it's always kind of scary when you roster him because he's capable of just breezing through a couple innings and then out of nowhere just being awful. But at $8,000, I think he's not going to be highly owned, and he offers a lot of upside tonight. The final guy that I think is interesting for GPPs on DraftKings is Francisco Liriano at $7,100. I am not a Liriano fan at all, but he does have upside because when he's on, he will rack up strikeouts. On top of that, he's facing a Royals team that while they don't strike out a ton, they don't walk like at all against left-handed pitching. They only walk about 6.5% of the time this season. And Liriano's biggest issue is his walks. But the main reason I'm interested in him in DraftKings GPPs is I expect Jaime Garcia at 6,900 to be really, really highly owned because he's in the best spot against the Braves that will allow you to roster Coors Field hitters. And Liriano is basically the same price, and he has a lot more upside than Garcia. Like, Garcia is more likely to give you a decent outing, but Liriano's got the much higher ceiling. So I think it's a really good GPP play if you are going to go with, just like a chalky stack to differentiate by going Liriano over Garcia. It's not a high probability play, but it's definitely something that can win you a tournament. For tournaments on FanDuel, there's a little bit less I like at pitcher. Verlander at 9,900 really jumps off the page to me because, like I said, I like his matchup with the Mets, and he's priced a lot more reasonably today. I don't think he'll be that highly owned because he's going up against Syndergaard, and people on FanDuel worry about the win. Blake Snell is 7,900, so that's a really nice price for him. Him and Verlander are my two top options, but I also do think that Jeremy Hellickson at 7,300 against the Padres has upside. I just don't love it because I think, one, people still target pitchers against the Padres too much. And I don't expect him to be highly owned, but I think he'll be higher owned than I would like if I roster him. And also, the Padres have a lot of good lefties in their lineup now that they haven't had most of the year. And Hellickson, he still limits damage against lefties, but his strikeout numbers aren't the same. Pineda at 8,600, same spot against the Indians, high upside. He's going to be really low owned on FanDuel, so that makes it appealing. I don't love the spot. I think there's a lot of risk, but I do think that there's a lot of upside given that he's going to be low owned. And then Irvin Santana at 7,400. He's going up against Tampa Bay, and after the trades Tampa made, I really am interested in just rostering any pitcher facing Tampa Bay. I don't think I'm going to go there with Santana today just because I think I'll be able to find a pitcher or use a pitcher that I like better. But I think if you make a lineup you love and you have, $7,400, $7,500 left over, then I would probably go Santana. Especially if it's a big field tournament, I would go Santana over Hellickson. For cash games on DraftKings, I like John Lester at 9,600. He's facing an A's team that they hit lefties better than they hit righties, but they haven't really crushed left-handed pitching this season. Like their WRC plus is only 97, and Lester's been good against righties with a 23% strikeout rate, 21% soft contact, and his price at 9,600 is pretty favorable. A lot of times this season he's been priced at $10,000, $11,000. Over $10,000, around $11,000, and that's not a price I want to pay for Lester because I don't think he has a huge ceiling. But at 9,600, I think he's a pretty safe option today. Jameson Taillon at 7,800, I think, is a really good play. He's at home in Pittsburgh going against the Reds, who no longer have Jay Bruce. The Reds lineup is out, and it's a pretty decent. It's as good of a lineup as the Reds can put out, but they're still just not a really good hitting team. They have some power, but without having Bruce, that's diminished, and the game's in Pittsburgh, which helps limit the power anyway. So I like Taillon as a cash game option. And then Jaime Garcia at 6,900, I probably will give in and roster him in cash games, just, one, for the block, and two, just because I think tonight's a night where you do need to get really good hitters because there's a lot of really good hitting spots. And at 6,900 against the Braves team that has struck out 20% of the time with a 77 WRC plus against lefties this season, I think it is a pretty good spot, especially because he's at home where he tends to pitch better. So those are my thoughts for right now. As always, stop into the chat and watch our expert show at 4:30 tonight, or message me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. Good luck tonight, guys.